Welcome back to the Hard Truth Distilling Company studios on this Wednesday. Thank you so much for being with us. Rick Bozich from WDRB.com joins us now, and lots to talk about. Of course, I talked briefly earlier about the situation that is going on with in the IU basketball community family, and it's just beginning. As I said earlier, Rick, the sources I've spoken to, these are just the first two, because this is a class action lawsuit. There will be many more coming forward. When, who, and all of that, I don't know. But to file it, they needed at least two, and I guess these Charlie and Harris were the guys who said, okay, I'll be I'll run through the wall first. But you've been around the program for a long time, and as was a long time situation over a program, and you hate to see it anywhere, but of course someplace of which we both cover.
Yeah, I mean, we've seen something like this. I guess it was at Michigan State, or and then the Ohio State stuff and Penn State or whatever. It's disturbing, it's upsetting, and it's hopefully they can get to the truth and sort through what really happened and watch it unfold as it does. I mean, I covered Harris, I covered Charlie Miller. Those guys were players in the mid 90s. A couple of them, I think, played with Sharon Wilkerson at Jeff. I saw that Charlie played 1 year with Pat Knight. So, and Dr. Bama, I don't really know. I just know he was around the basketball program for a long, long time. I don't even know. Is he still alive?
You know what? I have not looked that up yet. I believe so. I think possibly might be 88. But I am not positive on that, and I would have to
check,
look that up, to be honest with you. But yeah, it is what it is. But there's not a whole lot that I can add to it. There's nothing, because right now it's just, most people know what the rest of us know.
Right. I read the lawsuit last night, at least as much of it as I could understand, and pretty straightforward on what they said, and it's pretty upsetting to read.
Yep, it is what it is, and we'll let it play out. Now, moving forward, this basketball team kicks off the season. Not great timing for all of that, as Hoosier Hysteria rolls around. But of course, there's no relationship to what is going on with this team and the prospects of what they have coming up. Hoosier Hysteria Friday night for both the men's and the women's basketball teams. Not mostly just a show. You're not going to learn anything from that, but just an opportunity for the fans to get out and see these guys is all this is.
Yeah, and gals. Want the women to be there too. And they got number 25 in the preseason poll yesterday. The men are number 17. So Indiana's one of a small group of schools in the country that have top 25 men's and women's teams. So should be a lot of energy in the building, I would think. For the men, obviously created by all the new players that have come in, specifically, in my opinion, Miles Rice and Umar Ballo and Luke Goody and Cannon Carlisle. And for the women, see how they react, move on, respond to losing Mackenzie Holmes, arguably the greatest player in the history of the program.
Absolutely. As a matter of fact, right now, Indiana is one of just 5 schools that has football, men's and women's basketball ranked in the AP top 25. You're talking Alabama. I'm trying to remember. Maybe it's not USC. Ole Miss was Tennessee, one of the teams. Maybe? Very possibly. Let's see. There was one that was kind of, I was like, well, maybe Iowa State, which good for them. But up in the higher air where fans have been hoping for quite some time. But I don't think they expected the highest ranked of the 3 to be the football program.
Yeah, like Lee Corso once famously said, stop and take a picture of all this. To prove that it happened. I remember there. I don't think it might have been Corso was the coach when they obviously weren't 6-0 because this is the first time they've been 6-0 since 1967. But there was a year they might have been like 4-0 and played Nebraska, and Corso was the coach and a halfback by the name of IUBB. Do you remember that? He was.
Oh yes.
He came in and I think they beat Indiana like 60.
Oh yeah, I read your article on
63-7. Oops. So, it's going to be sold out. It's a national television game on Fox at noon. You're going to have another ranked team that you're playing. There's a lot at stake for Indiana in this game too. Actually, when you fill this, last time they filled the stadium was what, Cincinnati? And that was sort of the tipping point to head downhill. This is their chance to sort of, you get to 7-0 and then you got Washington the next week, and Washington just got blown out by Iowa last week. It's not crazy to say 8-0. You get to 8-0, you start really let your imagination go wild on what this team could possibly accomplish. And I'm really interested to see how this unfolds on Saturday. Indiana, I think, is legit. I don't think they're a fluke 6-0. The teams that they've beaten them all decisively, beaten them all by at least 2 touchdowns. You looked last Saturday or Friday night when, 6 days after they blew out Northwestern in the fourth quarter, Northwestern goes on the road and blows out Maryland. So that win looks better. So
yeah.
Let's see how good everybody is on Saturday.
Absolutely. And I'm looking forward to that, but I agree with you. I have not changed my perspective on this team. I still see an 11-1 season as more than a possibility. Of course, things have to happen. Health has to stay in there and all this, that, and the other thing. But I think that they end up beating Nebraska. I think they beat Washington. I think they beat Michigan State. And then I think they knock off Michigan at home and just really seal this incredible season. And then we're looking at a potential 10-0 Indiana going into a 9-1 Ohio State, which would be phenomenal. But yeah, that's letting the imagination run wild, but that's okay.
Well, but you and a lot of people, there's some podcasts I listen to and different things that before the season were saying, oh yeah, they're going to win at least 8 or they're going to win 10 or whatever. And I was thinking, dudes, study the history books. Indiana never wins 10. And I picked 5 because I didn't believe it was, a turnaround like this was possible, and I was wrong. So you got to be impressed by Cignetti, a guy, first of all, to put his neck out on the chopping block like that he did from the very beginnings when he got there, saying the kind of things he said, and then quietly working over the summer. When you look at all the things he had to do to put this team together, it was a lot. He had to bring guys in from a lot of different places. He had to pick the right guys. He had to, in terms of their ability to play, he had to pick the right guys in terms of their ability to buy into a team. He hasn't been afraid to let guys leave who didn't buy into a team, including some guys who were talented and could probably help them play. He just like, okay, if you don't want to be here, okay, this is what we're doing. We're going to move on without you. And it's impressive. And he's a legitimate difference maker as a coach. Some guys are just good coaches. This guy's a difference maker.
Yeah, I wrote down on a piece of paper, I think it was after week 2 maybe, and I showed it to Don Fisher, and it said, I wrote down, I can't remember exactly, but I saved it. It's in my bag. 11-1, Cignetti, National Coach of the Year, Big Ten Coach of the Year, and maybe something else. And Don just laughed and said, oh yeah, okay, big boy. I'm like, yeah, all right. And I just tucked it back away, and I'm going to bring it out at the end of the season. But I get it from people though, because if you go on the history, there's no chance. But there has been such a more change in college football and the ability, even though I can't believe you could do what he has done this fast, because he is completely changing the culture from within. And that includes the fans, as you see the sellout a week and a half before a game. forget that it's a sellout. It was a sellout a week and a half prior to the game. So that's crazy. But here's Troy Aikman talking about Curt Cignetti.
There was a couple years ago, I said something came up. The player was from Indiana. He mentioned it or something. And I said, hey, I'm surprised. I didn't realize they still play football at Indiana.
Oh, no.
And then, then you're like, okay, now I should get on Twitter because I'm going to get blown up. People are so sensitive about everything. And now just a few years later, I'm outwardly being supportive of Indiana. I mean,
yeah.
So I was watching them play UCLA a few weeks ago. Didn't know anything about this Coach Cignetti, Carl Cignetti. And
Carl.
I mean, how about that guy?
Yeah.
What he's done is amazing. So all of a sudden I've become this huge fan of this guy's. And now I'm a fan of the Hoosiers. So I'm talking to Joe I'm a bigger fan for the Hoosiers than he is.
Oh, I like there you go. Carl. Hey, Carl. Oh, man, that's a new one. We're going to start using that. Hey, Carl.
Must be Kurt's twin brother. He takes care of the special teams.
I'm telling you, man, that was funny. But yeah, the just all of the attention this has brought Indiana is crazy, and that's part of why football is so important to a school and to a program because of what it does. And this is what Indiana has been missing out on all of these years.
I mean, you read stories about Alabama. I've read stories about Ole Miss, different South Florida that have used football to grow enrollment, to recruit more higher quality students from out of state to get them to come there. And, like it or not, and we like it, sports is part of your college experience. And it's just a great way to unify the alumni base. I'm sure contributions go up not only to the athletic department, but to the alumni association. You can hit people with more mailings and say, hey, support your school or whatever. And as we've talked about before, I mean, every school needs to be a football school. The Indiana is at a disadvantage against the Ohio States, the Wisconsins, the Penn States, the Michigans, because they're selling out 7 or 8 home football games a year, 100,000 seats. So tickets in Indiana's averaging 40,000 for 6 home games some year. That's a huge financial disadvantage they've been at. So this year they're finally, I give credit to Pamela Whitten and really give credit to Scott Dolson and Buckner and the guys on the board of trustees. They said that's a big check to write to Tom Allen, but it's the one that has to be written. And so far it's turned out to be the right one.
Yeah, for it to start returning, getting a return on their investment this quickly, even I think they would be shocked. Not that it's a positive turn, but the massive way it has turned. I mean, this is boy, if a 180-degree turn could be any more of an opposite, there's nothing that this program is doing that is any correlation to what their past is. They have been able to leave all of that in the dirt and in the dust because there's no relationship from most of these players that are on this team today to any of that. And I think Cignetti doesn't even allow that into the conversation. No. It's the here and the now. It's where we are. It's this blueprint. It's this plan. It's this is what we're doing. This is how we're going to do it. And this is how, when you see how much difference the right coach and the right hire makes to any program.
For sure. I've said this before and I'll say it again. It's a cultural change, and it's sort of reminiscent to me of what I saw Howard Schnellenberger do at Louisville. When he came in, he made a bunch of big promises, and a lot of people rolled their eyes and thought he's what do you mean? We're on a collision course with a national championship. The only variable is time. But to really make a change in a big organization or a program that's had a tradition of not succeeding, that's what you have to do. You have to shock the system and get everybody thinking a different way. And he's been able to do that and then back it up. So he's halfway there this year. He's got 6 more to go. And we're all of college football is going to be watching to see how it plays out. There's been a flood of stories about IU. Pat Forty wrote one at SI.com. John Feinstein has one, I think, today at the Washington Post. Nicole Auerbach wrote one, I think, at NBC Sports. USA Today's had one. I heard there's at least one national writer coming in for the game on Saturday, so there'll be more. But they're still out there. If you read some of these stories, when they talk about the playoff contenders, they have the traditional teams in there, but then they have Indiana like in the, they're eligible now, but they're not going to be when
they're not in the top 12. They're not in most people's top 12.
No, they're not
at the end of the year.
That's just because people aren't used to seeing Indiana there. If Michigan had beaten the same kind of teams that Indiana's beaten this year, the way they've done it, every win by 2 touchdowns or more, never trailing at all, having a quarterback that ranks first in the league in passing, Michigan would be, they'd be right up there. But because it's Indiana, people aren't going to buy in until they're actually 12-0, and some people still aren't going to do it at that point, saying it was an easy schedule, it was a fluke season, and all that stuff. So that's where Cignetti, I'm sure, is like, that stuff's irrelevant. We don't care about that.
Well, and they use it as fodder. I mean, he wants that chip on their shoulder to stay humble and hungry. Well, this is part of how you do that. You don't read your positive clippings, but you can sure read these where people don't have faith in you. They still don't have the confidence in you. And he'll use that to continue to further what they're doing. And this will be the toughest matchup they faced as this Nebraska team comes in. But it's I've called it a something has to give kind of a game, because Indiana averaging 48 points a game and Nebraska giving up 11 points a game. But I when it comes down to it, I think it's just going to be that Indiana's offense is just too much. I'm not saying they're going to blow Nebraska out. I don't think that Nebraska's offense can match Indiana's, and I think Indiana's defense may not be exactly the same as Nebraska's. It's just there's a slight difference maybe. But I think that Nebraska's defense will find it much more difficult to keep up with Indiana than Indiana does keeping up with Nebraska's offense.
Yeah, and Nebraska's got something to prove too. I mean, they're a program that, we remember in the 80s and the 90s, they were traditionally national championship contenders. They won multiple national championships under Coach Tom Osborne. They haven't been able to do it since the mid-90s. And they've gone through a whole string of coaches, whether they thought Scott Frost was going to be the guy or they thought, what was the guy? Frank Solich was the guy. Who was the guy they got from LSU was a defensive coordinator? Bo Pelini, he was the guy. They've tried all the different things. Nebraska's back. It's back. It's sort of like Indiana basketball. And they have never really gotten back. Well, they're 5-1, and, they come in and beat a team ranked ahead of them. They're going to jump up in the polls, and they'll be 6-1, and they'll be thinking they're a team that has a chance to do. I think they play Ohio State after they play Indiana. So this is their moment too.
Absolutely. And there's nothing to say that, I keep saying Indiana is not going to go to Columbus and beat Ohio State. I don't see that happening. I don't have that on my bingo card, but there's nothing to say that it can't happen. I mean, I'm not dumb enough to say that this or that cannot happen. It's just not likely to happen because of for just so many different reasons. But it doesn't have to. We don't have to make this a complete off the rails crazy train 12-0 season for Indiana. That I don't know that people could handle that. That would just where would Curt Cignetti go from there if he comes in his first season and went 12-0? I mean, you want to talk about, even though there is no pressure at a place because they've sucked and they've never won, you come in and go 12-0. Man, did you just raise that bar?
What's funny is I just read a story from a columnist in Florida. He's got Curt Cignetti high on his list of guys that Florida should hire. We'll already see that's going to be another story that's going to be that Auburn or Florida, one of these SEC schools that's willing to pay a coach $10 million, is going to come in and try and recruit Cignetti away. So
yeah,
we'll see.
That'll be a problem. Although not that. And you don't have to be in it for the money to affect conversations, because when you double, go from well, what was he making at JMU? Probably 2.5 million, maybe. And now he'll be bumping up towards 5 million at Indiana. But if someone comes in and says, "Hey, yeah, we're going to give you 10," it's impossible not to listen to that. I've got to be honest with you. But although I do know that he's never been a guy who has jumped from job to job. He's got all these assistants who also came with him, moved their families. Cignetti's wife likes Bloomington a lot. So, and they're enjoying it right now. Plus, he's doing what no one has ever done at a place where it's never happened.
Right.
And it has happened at Auburn. It has happened in Florida. It's happened by multiple people. So this is just such a bigger challenge. And I think it would leave such a bigger legacy for him if he could come in and do this on a consistent basis and turn Indiana into a team in college football that is in the conversation with these other teams that are now, because there's going to be a breakaway.
Yeah, I mean, you look at this kind of a situation. We've seen it at other places. I mean, Lance Leopold did some big things at Kansas. Immediately, he was on everybody's hot list. Matt Campbell went in and won at Iowa State. Every year, he's been on people's hot list. Heck, when Tom Allen did really good at IU those 2 years, 2019 and 2020, he got the big contract extension because people thought Florida State or somebody might try and recruit him. It's the way the game is played. I'm sure at the end of the year that they'll sit down and talk about his contract, and he's earned a raise. And but if Cignetti is true to what he preaches and what he talks about, that's not something to talk about now. That's something to talk about at the end of the season.
Absolutely. We've got to take a break from the Hard Truth Distilling Company studios. Rick Bozich from WDRB.com is with us. When we come back, we'll talk about the fact that there's going to be a breakaway in college football. A bigger change is yet to come with the SEC and the Big Ten leading the way. Indiana Sports B Radio, back with more from the Hard Truth Distilling Company studios, brought to you by our good friends down at the Rusty Gator in Bedford. Back with more right after this.